Hey, it's Jordan with Status Coup. Nancy Pelosi, master political strategist and legislator, also corrupt as hell. She went on MSNBC, and it seems like she might be living in a dungeon of delusion. Let's take a look. This is MSNBC anchor Andrea Mitchell, married to Alan Greenspan, uh, asking her, what's going on? Why isn't Biden's accomplishments, so many accomplishments, why isn't it resonating? Look at Pelosi's denial and delusion about where Dems currently stand with the American people on the economy.
After the Supreme Court ruling, there was huge outrage. That has seemed to subside, at least among overriding concerns. Despite all the legislative accomplishments, and I want to cite them, I want to, say it's been an extraordinary session. You and the president have done so much in terms of domestic concerns, the economy. So why is this message, why do you think the president has gotten this message through the voters?
Well, first of all, let me say that I think that much of what you've said I don't agree with. That is to say, the New York Times poll, I think, is an outlier poll. You cite one poll, but all the other polls.
It's also the Real Clear Politics average is showing similar issues.
No, but that was one that brought down the average, and it was an outlier. It wasn't even that big a sample. So I dismiss that. I've been, since Congress adjourned, I've been in an average of 5 states a week, and I can tell you that women's concerns about their freedom are very, very much still very significant in terms of how they will vote. In fact, 80% of people who care about a woman's right to choose say they will vote, they will determine who they vote for. So again, Washington has always been, the Republicans are going to win, there's no question, for a year and a half. Now that has diminished in terms of that certainty, and there is a real race on, the Republicans are pouring endless money, dark, undisclosed special interest money into the campaigns, but we're holding our own. It's a matter of who turns out to vote. There are issues that of course, we want to fight inflation. It's a global issue. But some of the inflation in our country sprang from the fact that this president created nearly 10 million jobs, at least 9 million jobs, working with the private sector. The private sector creates a lot of that, and when you, as the distinguished chair of the Fed told me when I was a brand new member of Congress, Chairman Greenspan said, when you're talking about inflation, unemployment can be dangerously low. So they are not unrelated. So we feel pretty good about it. I track these campaigns very carefully. I believe that we will have the mobilization to own the ground, to turn out the vote.
Oh, where do you even start? Let's start with Andrea Mitchell, just so you know what we're dealing with, because Andrea Mitchell, who has a net worth of $5 million, right there, net worth of $5 million, I guess, to her, Biden has great accomplishments, and why aren't they resonating with the ungrateful masses? Biden's accomplishments, on the grand scheme of things, not really helping people now. $1,400 check a year and a half ago, not helping people now. Bipartisan infrastructure deal, which was really a privatization scheme. Nobody's waking up thanking their lucky stars for the bipartisan infrastructure deal. The expired child tax credit, not helping people now. As I've talked about, Biden could have fought for that. He could have went on the public offense against Joe Manchin to publicly pressure and shame Manchin for blocking the extension of that. Let me tell you something. If Biden would have extended the child tax credit, Manchin's the one who blocked it. The polls might read a little differently on how people feel about the Democratic Party versus the Republican Party and who can control the economy better, because that would be giving relief to people who really need it right now, particularly with inflation. So just know who's framing it, where she's coming from with her $5 million net worth. No clue. Andrea Mitchell has no clue what people average people, real working people are dealing with. They're not really feeling Joe Biden's accomplishments. If Joe Biden would have followed through on his promise for a $15 minimum wage, which he very much could have done, he could have ignored the non-elected. The parliamentarian is not elected. He could have ignored her and pushed the $15 minimum wage through in the original COVID reconciliation deal. But Pelosi, you got to love it when they love the New York Times, except when the New York Times has a poll clearly showing, the economy is number one. Abortion, which I think is a very important topic. We talked about it yesterday on the stream. Abortion is obviously very, very important. There will be people who vote on that. Lots of people who vote on that as a one issue voter this time. But in the totality of what people's top concerns are, right here, the New York Times Siena poll, 26% of likely voters cite the economy, jobs, the stock market, whereas inflation, cost of living, 18%, abortions at 5%, and then if you look down at, saving democracy and democracy issues, that's at, let me find it here, state of democracy, 8%. So, I mean, she could call it an outlier, but she's in denial. It's not an outlier. Most polls show that the top concern for people, not surprisingly, is their wallets, rising prices, jobs. Biden and Pelosi could crow, oh, he's created 9 million new jobs. Well, most of the jobs that he created were jobs that were lost during the pandemic that were brought back and were the same low-wage, shitty jobs that we had before the pandemic in this historic economic recovery. We live in the United Corporations of America, and a lot of the jobs that came back, no disrespect, are in the hospitality industry. These are not vibrant union jobs. These are low-wage, paycheck to paycheck kind of jobs. And when you have that kind of instability, in many cases, people having to work a second job or pick up extra hours at their main job, then you're met with inflation, high gas prices, food, electricity, rent, all of the increases. Yeah, that's going to be your top concern. And Biden and the Democrats have not shown much of any specifics on how they could lower inflation. In fairness, it's not all on Joe Biden. It actually is a global problem. But Biden could have done several things to lower gas prices. I've been talking about. He could have said to the fossil fuckers, the executives, hey, lower gas prices by the end of the week, or we're pulling the $15 billion we give you annually in free subsidies, i.e. corporate welfare that the fossil fuel industry gets. Some might say, Jordan, they would have just raised prices more if their subsidies were removed. I don't think so. I think they would have folded. If you look back at 1962, the steel companies were price fixing. And JFK said, okay, I'm pulling the contracts, the defense contracts we give you for submarines. I'm going to give them to a steel company that's not raising their prices. The steel executives folded like a cheap tent. I think the fossil fuel industry, if they were faced with losing $15 billion in free money every year, they would have lowered gas prices. More importantly, it would have shown that Biden is fighting corporate greed. Shocker, very popular position, fighting corporate greed. You know who else stood for fighting corporate greed and did kind of pretty decent over the last couple of years? Bernie Sanders came out of nowhere in 2016, fighting corporate greed. Happens to actually resonate with a lot of Americans. Shocker. So it's kind of laughable that Pelosi, who obviously loves the New York Times, all of the Libizzy liberals do, she's dismissing this New York Times Siena College poll. That's just an outlier. Abortion's actually a lot higher on the priority list to most Americans. I don't want to minimize it. I do think it's important. I totally understand voters, women, some men that might be voting just on that. But the facts are the facts. Most polls show abortion is now second or third as a priority compared to the economy. The other just incoherent, nonsensical thing she said, I wish I had Steve here, is she said the main reason we have inflation is because so many jobs were created. Laughable. So because we have so many jobs created, that means more people have money in their pockets, more money is being spent, i.e. prices go up. That is the CNBC version of inflation. That is the neoliberal corporate gas bags version of what causes inflation. That's not actually what causes inflation. What causes inflation is corporate price gouging. And in this case, what we're dealing with now is the supply chain problems, which still exist because of the pandemic, which, by the way, we're still in a pandemic, despite the fact that the media says we're not. And, if you need any of the proof, any more proof that the corporate price gouging is the problem, here, this is what Federal Reserve Chair Jerome Powell said about corporations increasing prices.
They're raising prices because they can. They're raising prices because they can.
That was when Elizabeth Warren grilled him a couple months ago. She was pointing out, I hate to give her credit because I'm not a big fan, she was pointing out most of this inflation is actually due to corporations price gouging. Corporations increasing prices, not because they're just passing off their increases that they're facing, but they're marking up prices. Have you seen a huge offensive from the Democratic Party against that corporate price gouging? Yeah, the House passed a bill like they do a lot of times. They pass messaging bills that they know are going to die in the Senate, so there's no actual fear of it passing. They don't actually want to stop corporate price gouging because their donors are the ones corporate price gouging. Democratic Party and Republican Party. The donors are the ones doing the corporate price gouging. Let me repeat. The donors are the ones doing the corporate price gouging. There's been reports and data showing that the markups that you're seeing in the oil industry, grocery stores, real estate are not proportionate to the increased costs they are receiving on their end. Democrats could have aggressively ran on this corporate price gouging. They could have had specific policies to force companies to lower their prices. They could have ran on, dare I say, antitrust and reform in terms of the monopoly power of a lot of these corporations. They're not doing that. Why? Because they're owned by most of these industries, just like the Republican Party. We live in the United Corporations of America. Get your United Corporations of America shirt at the StatusCoup.com store. Just saying. It's all the rage, the United Corporations of America shirt. So it's pretty pathetic. It's pretty pathetic what this delusional Pelosi is saying and how she's responding. I honestly think that Nancy Pelosi, Chuck Schumer, and all of these old neoliberal dinosaurs truly believe, because they're so disconnected from people are hurting, and they truly believe that people will ignore or overlook their economic struggles to vote for, vote based on, important issues like abortion, democracy, etc. They'll put their struggles aside for the bigger picture, like women's reproductive rights. Maybe that would be nice in an ideal world, but that's not how people live. Most people live based on, what do I need to do to survive? Who is going to benefit me in terms of making sure my children can eat, making sure we can keep the lights on, making sure we're not going to be pushed to the streets. It's pretty pathetic that the Democratic Party is so corrupt, so visionless, has not delivered on their promises economically, that people in polls are saying they trust the Republicans more on the economy. When the Republicans are openly saying first thing they'll do is expand and extend Trump's tax cuts. In 2017, the $1.6 trillion tax, $1.9 trillion tax plan Trump passed, 84% went to the rich. They want to just continue doing that, rinse and repeat the same bullshit trickle-down economics they've been doing for 40 years. But people are trusting them more. That's not a messaging problem among Democrats. That's a policy problem. And the policy problem stems from people like Nancy Pelosi, who main role is not legislating, it's fundraising. She is a fundraising powerhouse from the very corporations and filthy rich CEOs that are price gouging you. So that's Nancy Pelosi's dungeon of delusion. I think she's going to be pretty, I don't know if she'll be surprised, but don't think she'll be calling it out an outlier on election night.